What's the first thing that comes to mind when we talk about a confrontation between two superpowers? Usually it's something very scary like a nuclear war.
Both sides armed themselves in preparation for a potential Third World War.
Мы всегда понимали, что это будет война.
June 18th, 1982. Military drills are being conducted all over the USSR as the Soviet Union demonstrates their response in store for any country that attacks it.
Ну, это был сигнал всему миру в том смысле, что ненаказуемых уже на земном шаре нет.
These exercises later became known as the 7-hour nuclear war in the United States. What scared Americans the most was how an adroit Soviet interceptor satellite knocked out a target imitating an American spacecraft. President Reagan announced the launch of the Star Wars program soon thereafter.
Our security is based on being prepared to meet all threats.
I'm Marina Kosterova, and today we are going to take a look at how military equipment was created during the Cold War era. Who won the space race?
We're at war with the most dangerous enemy who's ever faced mankind in its lifetime. Foreign dollar claims are 27.3.
Спутник на орбите. Это событие явилось сенсацией века.
Это повергло, конечно, в шок, в том числе и американцев.
I remember that people were really stunned, but it was a surprise. It was something that here in America we call a wake-up call.
Запуском спутника сразу дали понять, что вы, ребята, за океаном не отсидитесь, имейте в виду.
Через несколько лет академик Королёв отправлял в полет Юрия Гагарина, первого космонавта планеты.
After the launch of the first satellites in Yuri Gagarin's flight, it becomes obvious that space is potentially a crucial theater in a probable war between the two superpowers. Monitoring launch sites and the movements of military equipment was a headache for both countries from the very beginning of the Cold War. American spy planes were flying literally along Soviet borders, and they were flying freely over the territory of the USSR as well. High-altitude U-2 reconnaissance aircraft were created specifically for this purpose.
It was developed to conduct surveillance over the Soviet Union in the 1950s.
Довольно далеко вглубь, аж до Свердловской области долетел, пока не сбили Пауэрса.
Самолет был сбит.
But the U-2 flights after that time were canceled, and that was the sort of the door to the next phase of surveillance of the Soviet Union by the United States, and that's with the Keyhole series of spy satellites.
Beginning in 1959 through 1960, they fail over and over and over again.
The failures of the US tests do not weaken the vigilance of Soviet engineers as they prepare to counter American space spies.
Наши, как сейчас говорят, партнеры в 50-х годах уже начали разрабатывать системы, которые были предназначены как оружие борьбы в космосе и из космоса. Был такой запущен спутник Discovery, может быть, слышали, который вот как раз для этого предназначался. Поэтому создание полетов, а потом ИСов, это был наш ответ вот на эти разработки Соединенных Штатов Америки.
But even the simplest satellite hunters, like the Soviet Palyot rockets, were created only in the mid-1960s, so the US could safely spy on the USSR from space during the nearly 4 years prior to that.
The first successful one does not come until the summer of 1960, and it's a camera in a spacecraft that flies in orbit over the Soviet Union taking pictures.
Program that used film. So basically sending up a satellite with a bunch of canisters of film, and then what it would do is it would drop these canisters into little capsules that would re-enter the atmosphere and then be caught in midair by airplanes.
At first, American satellites had one photo camera. Then they had two, one located at the head of the satellite and one at its tail. And they were capable of taking panoramic and even stereoscopic shots. The front camera was tilted 15 degrees backward and the rear camera 15 degrees forward. In August of 1960, the Americans received the first pictures of Soviet military facilities from space. At the same time, Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev announced that American space spies would face the same fate as the downed U-2 plane and ordered that work on creating an orbital reconnaissance satellite be sped up.
Это были разведчики беспилотные, небольшой массы, в которые выводились ракеты «семерка», так называемые, которые выводила Гагарина, порядка 6-7 тонн.
Soviet space reconnaissance begins with the Zenit. These top-secret satellites look very similar to the one piloted by Yuri Gagarin. The only difference is that in the Zenit, the pilot's seat is replaced by space recon equipment.
И получалось, что у нас с одного и того же космодрома, с одних и тех же, соответственно, средств запускались ракеты, корабли внешне, в общем-то, не особо чем отличались, да?
The Soviet satellite's versatility terrified the American government.
We were told that any given day, a nuclear war might break out.
The Zenit had equipment for radio reconnaissance and 3 long-focus cameras with rolls of film containing 1,500 exposures. At an altitude of 200 kilometers, after spending just 4 days in orbit, it could obtain images covering a 10 million square kilometer area, more than the entire territory of the United States. A Zenit could spend 8 to 15 days in space.
То есть это фотоаппарат, они работали, естественно, в автоматическом режиме. Земля выдавала программу, и станция это наводилась на заданные заранее цели, которые интересовало Министерство обороны. Когда вот из таких вот, будем так говорить, пробных целей по вертолетоносцу, который стоял в Севастопольской бухте. И он говорит, я вот с помощью этого прибора различал звенья якорной цепи.
In 1962, the USSR secretly sets up missiles armed with nuclear warheads in Cuba in order to protect Fidel Castro's regime. The world is literally on the brink of a nuclear war.
Мы просто-напросто подтянули ракеты среднего радиуса действия, но на Кубу. И там мы закрывали, в общем-то, чуть ли не всю Америку до Великих озер.
A gloomy symbol of those days, 2 rockets awaiting launch at the Baikonur Cosmodrome. One contains an unmanned station for exploring Mars. The other is fit with a nuclear warhead targeted at the USA. Fortunately, the crisis is settled, and on November 1st, 1962, the USSR launches the Mars 1 spacecraft. But neither the Soviet Union nor the US can launch anything without the other noticing. By the mid-1960s, Soviet and American eyes in space are taking satellite photos of cities, missile launchers, submarine bases, airfields, and major factories non-stop, as all of these are potential targets for nuclear attacks.
И у нас в СССР и в США развиваются активно баллистические ракеты для поражения, территорий соответствующих потенциального противника.
The USSR didn't hide the fact that Moscow was developing projects that would make it possible to hit the United States from orbit. One of them was a so-called global rocket.
Парад венчают гигантские орбитальные ракеты. Возможная мощность их ядерных головок фантастична. Они способны поражать объекты противника буквально с любого направления и практически неуязвимы для средств противоракетной обороны.
The demonstration of orbital weapons utterly terrifies the US. They know Soviet design bureaus have been working to create a wide range of launch vehicles since the early 1960s. Khrushchev declares that the country's factories will soon be turning out missiles like sausages. At the same time, both sides understand their targets to be destroyed both on land and in space. But how exactly to reach your enemy's orbital eyes? How to destroy spies in the skies and blind your foe? May 26, 1958, a B-47 strategic bomber takes off from Cape Canaveral Air Force Base to the United States, lifting a bold Orion rocket into the air. This weapon is capable of carrying a nuclear charge that can strike Soviet satellites in low orbit at a distance of up to 250 kilometers above the Earth. July 9, 1962, an intermediate-range ballistic missile dubbed Thor is launched from Johnston Atoll in the Pacific Ocean. A nuclear explosion occurs at an altitude of 400 kilometers, which is the most powerful blast in the entire history of near-Earth space exploration. A blow of such force would, of course, solve the problem of enemy spy satellites. The problem was that nuclear explosions in space would affect not only the Soviet equipment, but also America's Nike Zeus anti-missile defense system, which was already in service. The powerful atomic flares would blind all satellites within thousands of kilometers without exception. That's when American engineers bet on suborbital vehicles. These are supposed to deliver satellite-destroying missiles into orbit literally on their backs.
Они пошли от авиационных средств поражения. Вот самая такая яркая программа. На F-15 устанавливалась ракета с малогабаритным снарядом, даже так, снарядом. И этот снаряд, который был головной частью, он должен был прямым соударением с целью разрушать вот любой искусственный спутник.
And what about the USSR? Soviet engineers are given a task to design missile-like satellites capable of turning enemy orbiters into cosmic dust.
Первые спутники – это были спутники серии «Полет-1», которые начали делаться в 1962 году. Но поскольку тогда спутники, в отличие от нашего времени, делались очень быстро, в 1963 году они уже были готовы к испытаниям.
They are created under the direction of an engineer whose name was kept secret for a long time, Vladimir Chelomey. All of the Soviet Union's core satellite manufacturing facilities fall under his leadership. Chelomey himself worked at a top-secret design and testing facility in Reutov in Moscow region. This is where we're about to go. This is where the first Soviet satellite fighter, Истребитель Sputnikov, or simply IS, was created and underwent its first tests. NPO Машиностроение has been one of the leading space and rocket companies for over 70 years. How did the idea of creating satellite fighters come about? Why did you feel there was a need for it?
Чтобы противопоставить американцам какое-то противодействие, и было предложено у нас тоже создать систему противоспутниковой обороны. И такая система была задана постановлением в 1961 году, и началась разработка системы так называемой ИС.
So the Americans already had satellite fighters that could destroy our satellites?
Да. В это время американцы разрабатывали различные системы противоспутников. Они базировались на атолле Кваджлейн в Тихом океане. Там стояли Найк Зевс. Этот Найк Зевс в конце концов был модификацией противоракетной обороны. Но они его приспособили для сбития спутников. Точность была неважная, плохая, скажем. Мы пошли другим путем.
Moscow, November 1st, 1968. A strange message reaches the Kremlin. Groom met bride and gave her 32 kisses. This message surely cheers the Soviet statesman, since the news encrypted in it says that the USSR's latest satellite fighters have successfully passed tests in space. Like all ingenious things, Vladimir Chalamet's idea was simple. Having reached orbit, an interceptor makes a revolution around the Earth while tracking stations on the ground transmit targeting data to it. On its second revolution, the interceptor spots the target and maneuvers towards it. Then, on command from Earth, the interceptor destroys the target. A satellite killer like this carried about 300 kilograms of explosives and submunitions. What's more, the interceptor could shoot in different ways at the same time.
А радиальный – это когда спутники вот таким роем, шарапнель, таким роем распределяются. И прожекторный, когда вот этим дробью, будем так условно говорить, можно стрелять узким пучком вслед того спутника, который летит.
In order to fully grasp how this worked, we are going to head to a shooting range. Are you ready? All three cylinders share similar properties. They have destructive fragments inside, explosives at the bottom, and the explosion is targeted. But the impact is slightly different. The first explosion is scattered. The second explosion is more focused in the center. And then finally, the third explosion is pinpoint accurate. Of course, this experiment is being conducted on the ground, not in space, but the core principles are the same. Engineers made three cylinders like this to represent the warhead on the satellite fighter, and they made this just for us in a closed lab. We can't show you how they were made or what's inside, but we will show you the impact they have on our target, which in this case is not a satellite, but a metal plate. The first explosion will be scattered, so the shrapnel will fly in all sorts of places. But first, we need to get out of here. Let's see what happens to the target. 3, 2, 1, let's go! Oh my God, that was intense! Oh my God, that was intense! As we can see, the stand here was all exploded to different places. I can't even see the cylinder. Well, we see several holes that were made by the shrapnel. Here we go. Right, so this was our scattered hit. That's why it went all over the metal plate, and we can see right through. So there we have it. We have about more than a dozen holes. A second explosion's coming up. It should be a more focused shrapnel hit. 3, 2, 1, go! I love it! Here's our second metal plate, which is representing a satellite. Let's not forget that. And let's see what happened with this one. And there we have it. As you can see, the holes are more focused in the center, so no holes on each side. And that's because this hit was more targeted, more focused, as we said. Well, we have one more warhead left, and let's see what happens with that one. And the next one's going to be a sniper shot right on target. Go! Oh, this one was much stronger. Oh, this one was much stronger. The result is completely different. So we have fewer holes. The holes themselves are different sizes, and there's a main one right in the middle that looks kind of like a heart, right? So, which kind of explosion is the most dangerous for a spacecraft? Which could destroy it for sure? The result that appears closest to what Soviet scientists wanted to achieve in space, according to its destructive power, is plate number 2. And it's clear that no satellite could survive such an attack. In the fall of 1968, the USSR launches a secret satellite, the Cosmos 252. While in orbit, it locks onto a target and successfully destroys it. Ground trackers register 32 on-target fragment hits. That's why the world's first instance of one satellite destroying another was reported with the cryptic phrase, "Groom met bride and gave her 32 kisses." Despite the mystery surrounding the trials, the United States was well aware of the success of the Soviet Union's satellite fighters and was developing its own version of a space interceptor that could also serve as a spy. This project was dubbed Zenit.
Zenit was a system by which satellites could be inspected by other satellites. In other words, it was a robot that would be launched into space, rendezvous with a satellite, inspect it, and potentially destroy it.
To achieve that, the satellite was to be equipped with small rockets. The program lasted until the mid-1960s, and in 1965, $2 million were allocated to it. However, it never actually came out of development.
The danger of accidental collision and any number of other things. If the Zenit was inspecting a satellite and it was a benign satellite, a weather satellite or something like that, and it was accidentally destroyed, it would create an international incident.
With the mothballing of the Zenit program, the Soviet Union was left in the catbird seat in terms of conventional anti-satellite weapons. The satellite assassins were designed to take out reconnaissance satellites, but by the mid-60s, conviction was growing on both sides of the ocean that unmanned equipment wasn't enough, and that people needed to be directly involved in space reconnaissance too. The next round of the space race began, the creation of orbital stations.
Когда можно было включить фотоаппарат, естественно, по желанию, значит, по обстановке, задумался целый комплекс, в который входила орбитальная станция сама, а также транспортный корабль снабжения.
The Americans are the first to create a project for a space reconnaissance station. They call it MOL, which stands for Manned Orbiting Laboratory, but this is no science lab.
У них был проект военной станции МОЛ. Вот МОЛ была чисто военная станция.
The station was designed as a cylinder about 13 meters long and about 3 meters wide. The astronauts were to spend up to 30 days on board. Its main mission was space reconnaissance. But the MOL also had to take out enemy satellites, either by removing them from orbit by taking them with it, or by simply destroying them on the spot. However, the MOL program remains only on paper. Some say the cost of US moon missions was so high that MOL became unaffordable. Nonetheless, the MOL program marked the dawn of space spying. Moscow, July 1974. A special capsule is eagerly awaited that is to be dropped from an orbital station which both superpowers had by that time. This is the capsule that was used to deliver everything that was filmed on space back on Earth. Now, the unique aspect of it all is that this is the actual capsule that was in space, and you can even see from the wear and tear here. And apparently, it brought back with it some top secret information. The Americans would give a lot to get a hold of at least one of these, even if they were afraid of them.
Вот летает станция, что вот у них там есть капсула специнформации, вот они пусковую заложат туда эту самую атомную бомбу и возьмут, спустят.
The 1970s. The superpowers on opposite sides of the ocean are considering options for involving orbital stations in combat. If a war broke out, the top priority targets for satellite destroyers would be manned stations because they could blind the enemy by destroying them. October 1969. Soviet newspapers report the launch of the Cosmos 248 and Cosmos 249 satellites. Officially, these are satellites for space exploration. In fact, they were testing top-secret satellite interceptors capable of firing in space. The details of these tests are still classified. According to some sources, the Cosmos 248 served as a target, while the Cosmos 249 acted as a kamikaze fighter. During its second revolution around the Earth, it maneuvered towards its target and exploded, destroying it. The launch of the American Gemini 4 spacecraft sped up the creation of the Soviet satellite interceptor. In the summer of 1965, the crew of the spacecraft was practicing how to approach other objects in orbit, that is, docking. Why? The Soviets were certain that the Americans wanted to steal or destroy their spacecraft.
Могли подойти к нашим объектам и, может быть, даже и навредить. Поэтому возникла мысль, да, значит, чтобы осуществить самооборону.